Welcome to Live from Mars. My name is Alex. You can call me Alex or Mars, whatever you choose. And today I am sitting down for yet another episode in the mini-series that is my 5 favorite albums of 2024. This is the 3rd installment. We covered already Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet with Nick Palmai and The Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift with my dear friend Seth Betzler. Highly encourage you to check both those episodes out if you haven't heard them already. But today's episode is going to cover the album of the year deemed by probably the most publications that I've seen. It is authentic, it is bold, it is abrasive, it is intense, it is vulnerable while being all of those things. It completely defined 2024 both in music and in pop culture. I am talking about no other album other than Brat by Charli XCX. And like the episodes for Short and Sweet and the Tortured Poets Department, I am bringing along another special guest to walk through Brat with me. You are about to meet him, but first, if you are not already subscribed to the podcast or following on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, make sure you do that so you are immediately notified when every new episode of Live from Mars comes out. So make sure you do that. And without any further ado, let's kick off the conversation on Brat. Adam, welcome to Live from Mars.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here. I know we've been going back and forth trying to figure out what the right episode to have you on is, so I'm thrilled that we made it work, and especially about this album, because this is one of those albums I needed to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this has been one of my favorites of this whole year.
And I know Adam from being in the pop culture content creator space, and we've gone back and forth about what kind of album we should talk about, and Charli XCX's album has been a complete game changer, and it has pretty much defined music and also pop culture in 2024, which is exactly why I wanted you to be the one to talk about this album with me, because where some people are pop music, some people are pop culture, you do a really, really killer job of doing both. So that is really like the secret sauce here.
Thank you. Well, honestly, it's all about the artists I'm talking about. Charli just made such a big impact, not only on pop music, but pop culture this whole year, with Brat kind of tying into every single big cultural moment of the year, which has been super exciting to witness as a fan. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it and to talk about it.
Absolutely. So let me formally introduce Adam. Adam, or otherwise known as Adam the Flop on TikTok, which I think is the funniest username I've probably ever seen, has over 1.4 million with an M followers on TikTok and over 99 million likes. Adam has become a go-to source not only for me, but also for millions, clearly, of others who are looking for pop culture insights, music business news, reviews, reactions, you name it. His engaging content has just completely captivated me and audiences globally. So I'm thrilled to have him here. Welcome to the show. It is an absolute pleasure. We're going to go into excruciatingly painful detail on Charli XCX's Brat. But before we get there, I want to let you tell your story to the audience. Tell us a little bit about how you started off when you realized that music was your favorite thing in the world, and you then took that to social media, and how that led to where you are today.
For sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for that intro. That was so nice.
Of course.
But yeah, so I've always just loved pop music. Growing up, I would watch American Idol every week, and that was sort of my intro to becoming a fan. And fan Twitter, even I would create fan accounts for like every contestant on American Idol, and so that was like my introduction to, I guess, like fandom culture. Then I just started learning more about different labels and just how the industry works. And so I always really wanted to work in the music industry. And I went to college. I got my bachelor's degree in advertising, hoping to find some sort of marketing, advertising, social media role within the music space. During that time, it was when I was applying to jobs, it was like when COVID was happening. And so it was really hard at the time to get a job. Ended up going to grad school in Tampa, Florida, studied social media marketing, hoping for the same thing, like still trying to, get a corporate social media marketing job. I started posting on TikTok like December of 2020 because I couldn't find a job in the music industry. So I was like, you know what, let me just make videos about music. Like, I feel like that would just be a way for me to at least like let out that passion,
Right. And boost a resume in case anyone was interested.
Exactly. Yeah. So for a while, it was just like a hobby. And by the end of my program, I started making a little more money from doing social media, which I feel like for brands, it took them a while to like recognize the commentary space as a niche. So once I graduated, I was like, maybe I should just make a move out to LA. Like I had never been to LA before, but I knew that if I wanted to like make something out of this, I needed to be like probably in New York or LA. And so I decided to just come out to LA. And then I guess like I just started having more in-person opportunities with music too. Like I started doing interviews. My first ever interview was with Charli XCX at Spotify's Wrapped event, which was like, almost exactly like 2 years ago.
I
Right.
didn't know
That
that.
was, yeah. So that was like during the crash era. And so I started just getting more opportunities like that. And then that sort of was a sign to me where I was like, okay, I made the right decision. I'm in LA. At the time though, I was working for like a media production agency. I was doing that while doing content creation in LA. But then after I was here for maybe about like 6 months, I think, I just started making more money from it to the point where I was like, okay, I think I'd be okay if I focused on this full time.
That's crazy. So when I shared my list of the top 5 albums of 2024, we chose Brat for this conversation. Why Brat? And what significance does it hold for you? I mean, now knowing that your first interview ever was Charli makes this so much better. But is there
Yeah.
anything else in terms of like why Brat was such an important album for you this year?
Yeah, well, I feel like one reason why I just love Charlie in general is because she takes marketing so seriously for her albums, and just you can tell how strategic she is with everything. And she
Oh,
even
yeah.
mentions that too. She's like, my favorite part about creating an album is the campaign for it and like thinking about how I'm going to market it. And so I just think the marketing for this album was perfect. And so I just genuinely loved seeing everything that she was doing for this era. 2 years ago, when she was like finishing up the Crash era and she first started that private Instagram account, the 360 Brat account. And
Yep.
so that I feel like that was like such an important part for this album era because everybody wants to be in that account. Like it took me months to get in it, and I was like so mad. I was like, I just want to be accepted into this account. But I feel like that just gained her so many more fans, and is a big reason why this era took off the way it did. So yeah, aside from just really connecting with it sonically, like seeing everything that she was doing with the pre-era promo as well as like the visuals and her performances, the 360 video, and like all those like internet queens
Yeah.
cameos. Like it was just so iconic, and so I think that she just did a really good job at getting people to talk about her. I love the idea of her making like a club album, completely new. And I'm just so happy that it got the recognition it deserved for sure.
Absolutely. You hit on so many points that I cannot wait to get into a little bit more detail on. But for those who are not as aware with Brat, some quick stats achievements that Brat has had, because unless you've been living under a rock, you got to know what Brat is at this point. I mean, Brat's summer, huge cultural moment. But Brat came out in June 2024, debuted at #1 in the UK, Australia, and Ireland, and reached the top 10 in 12 other countries, including the US, where it debuted at #3, marking her highest debut on the Billboard 200 so far. In terms of critical acclaim, it has a Metacritic score of 95, making Brat the #1 most acclaimed album of 2024. It is nominated for 7 Grammys, including Album of the Year, Record of the Year for 360, and it just proves how solidified Charli's impact is on the modern pop landscape. Cultural impact, the album's lime green aesthetic went completely viral, influencing TikTok trends, fashion trends, even political campaigns. I mean, Kamala is Brat. Like, in what world are we living in?
Iconic.
In what world are we living in? The day that Kamala announced that she was the nominee taking over for Biden, Charli tweets, Kamala is Brat. And then you see every Kamala social account with the Brat green aesthetic. Back to what you were saying about the marketing of the album, that was by far the most intriguing part for me. And we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, but like both coming from business backgrounds and studying advertising and marketing made me wonder if this kind of rollout for an album would have worked for anyone else. It's something that I'm very afraid of as we head into 2025, that others are going to have seen how much of a success this was, thinking they can just replicate the minimalist aesthetic of it and giving this authentic, I give no fucks attitude and trying to make it work. And it won't. For anyone
Yeah. Oh,
listening, it
absolutely
will
not.
not
Yeah.
work. So what I'm really curious about is, from your perspective, why you think it worked so well and why it had to be Charli and it worked for this album with this sound and this everything surrounding the rollout of it.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think that like because the fact that Charlie for a while was known as like underground artist, her fan base, even though it was like smaller than a lot of other artists, was always very strong. And she had a very strong community on the internet, and she is just really good at social media. So I think going into this era, her fan base, because they were already strong and like passionate about her, they were doing a lot of the marketing for her. Just like talking about
Right.
her, like doing things like making fan cams and like putting the Kamala's Brat, you know, fan cams out there. Like a lot of that was just fans of Charli just wanting to like do something funny on the internet. So a lot of it was done through the fans. And I think because of the fact that like at the start of the era, certain things were going viral, like Charli having Julia Fox and Rachel Sennett in the 360
Yeah,
video. Like they were, she was just really smart with starting the era off with things that she knew would go viral. And so 360 was such an important pre-album single. And if that song didn't come out in the way that it did with that music video, I don't think that Brat would have been as big. You know, like
totally.
it gave her so much hype going into the era. Yeah, I think that 360 and Bondage, the songs that she put out ahead of the album were very calculated, as everything she does is. And so it was just the whole era has just been super exciting to experience.
The irony of all of this to me is that the album is at its core in terms of even like songwriting, production, aesthetic, everything is messy, the antithesis of what should work in a traditional pop music landscape. Everything about this is the opposite of what should work, yet it was the biggest album of the year. And all I've been doing is thinking about the reasons why.
hmm Yeah, it's crazy because it is even the sound of the album. It's kind of like obnoxious in the best way possible.
Oh,
Certain
yeah.
sonic choices, but it just makes sense. And I feel like for Charli too, it makes sense for her. I think everybody is really into showing personality through your music right now, which she definitely
Right.
did through Brat. That's a big reason why like Sabrina and Chapel took off too, just by showing their personality. And I think Charli just did it in such a smart way this
Yeah,
year.
that you literally took the next point I wanted to make was about authenticity being at the core of this. And you really hear authenticity shine through in the lyrics that Charli is singing about. And we'll go into a few songs in a moment, but authenticity is at the core of what worked in 2024. And you mentioned Chapel and Sabrina being components of that. Why do you think that is what worked so well this year? Because it clearly wasn't limited to just one artist. It wasn't like a one-off thing. It was very consistent in that this is what people want to see and hear. And you're even seeing it right now in this moment with Messy by Lola Young. The song is
hmm
literally called
Yeah,
Messy. It is so
yeah,
authentic. Her style of songwriting is so bold and loquacious, and it's completely authentic. So
yeah.
why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think in terms of album eras, I think people really miss the idea of an album era like being long and like the 2010s pop eras. I feel like people really miss that. I know I definitely did. And I
Yeah.
feel like at the top of a good album era is whatever artist's personality. They need to show that through their visuals and their music. And so once we saw that with multiple different artists this year, I think that was the core of it was them just showing who they were and being authentic and Charlie not being afraid to like say bumping that in her song, you
Yeah.
know, not caring about anything that they were singing about.
It kind of took the whole hashtag no filter movement to the complete next level. That's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking through. And it's just mesmerizing to me that this is what people are wanting because on one hand of the spectrum, you have this where it's like no filter. I'm going to put my album cover as the unarguable, like ugly color of green. It's a hideous shade of
yeah,
green with a blurry word, one word of the album in a blurry, generic Arial narrow font. It is the simplest album cover, yet it worked so well. And I remember actually when she was either right before the album came out or right when the album dropped, she updated all of the old albums covers to reflect this new aesthetic. And that to me was like pure genius because you're
yeah,
really enveloping people into the world of this new sound. Like your whole point about making eras that are not just limited to a few months or weeks, even for some artists, making this feel like it's larger than just itself. I loved that.
yeah. I love that too. I feel like it also got a lot of people who were just tuning into Brat interested in her other albums because they were like, oh, she did this with every other
Absolutely.
album. This is cool. And so I feel like that was just all around genius marketing, not only for Brat, but for discography in general.
Absolutely. So, a few key songs that I feel like make up the backbone of this album. Right off the bat are our bookends. You have 360 and you have 365.
hmm
These two tracks kind of act as like thematic siblings. 360 is an upbeat celebration of this internet it girl persona with like very sharp and somewhat polished production in a weird way that is kind of not what you get on the rest of the record. 365 kind of takes that even further. It's way darker. It's way more experimental. What do you see the relationship between these two songs being, and does one resonate more with you than another?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love both of the songs. I feel like, yeah, 360 is kind of like the thesis statement of this album. It was such a perfect intro, and 365 with it being the closing track, I feel like she's taking us back to more experimental eras, which I really like. I love the Shy Girl remix too of 365. To answer your question, I feel like
Interesting.
if I'm comparing like 360 and 365, I would say 360. But if I add in the Shy Girl remix, 365, because that is my favorite remix off the remix album.
It is my least favorite.
The Shy Girl one,
It
really?
is. It is.
And what's your favorite?
Girl So Confusing with Lorde.
Oh, duh. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Can't not be. Like,
yeah.
whoa.
Exactly. They should have submitted that for best pop duo.
It's
Like, I get why they submitted
crazy to
Billy,
me.
but like,
It's so annoying because it's so much better of a song, but Billy being on guest will win them the Grammy. Like, it was a very clear strategic choice, and I'm glad that they did what they did because the field are incredibly competitive this year, given how big a
yeah,
year of music it was. This, to me, is like a surefire
yeah.
lock. How can it not be?
Right, yeah. Especially, yeah, if Girl So Confusing was nominated and it didn't win, like that would have, I guess, made me even more mad. But
Right,
so I guess
right.
it's fine. Like if she wins either way, like good for her. But yeah, no, Girl So Confusing is great too.
I was planning on doing this later, but this actually feels like the right time to do it. I do on my TikTok a best worst fave series where I would put an album on my record player and I would say what I think the best song, the worst song, and my personal favorite song on it is. So we're going to play best worst fave. Adam,
Okay.
what would
Yeah.
you say your take for the best song on Brat, the worst, and your personal favorite? And this can extend across the remix album.
Okay, okay. Oh, that's such a hard question. Best, worst, fave. Okay, let me start with worst because there's definitely songs that I skip. I would say the song I skip the most is probably Rewind. I just never got super
Hmm.
into it. I know, I feel like a lot of people's least favorite is Mean Girls, but I don't know. I kind of like Mean Girls.
I have no issue with Mean Girls. I was actually listening
It's
to it at the
fun.
gym and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, kind of hit.
It's a good, yeah, right? It's a good like hype song. Yeah. Worst, I would say Rewind. Favorite, I would say is Sympathy is a Knife, I think, because that chorus just like gets you. I like honestly wasn't a big fan of the remix,
Mm.
even though I love Ariana.
Yeah, you
Was
love
super
her.
happy. Yeah, I was super excited about them collabing, but I really love the chorus of the original. It's the best.
Your critical hat is on what you think objectively the best song on the album is.
I kind of think it's So I. Just
Whoa.
the lyrics in that song and just the whole message about, Sophie and its importance to both Charlie and A.G. Cook. I think her putting a song like that on Brat was really powerful, just knowing how much Sophie has influenced Charlie. She even sings in the song about how Sophie would like push her and challenge her, which was really
Hmm.
important. Like if Charlie had never released Vroom Vroom, like we wouldn't be getting these experimental projects. So I think, and
Right.
just like lyrically, I think it's a beautiful tribute. So I would say that, yeah,
Wow. I was not
yeah.
expecting that.
Yeah, I feel like it's not a lot of people's favorite because it is just slower and doesn't encompass the feeling of Brat, but I just think it's so beautiful. Yeah,
It's a nice break for me when I'm listening to this album. The
yeah,
softer moments are so much more appreciated than on other artists' records because the
yeah,
rest of the album is so on the other end of the spectrum where it's thrashing club beats and intense synths that are incredibly jarring. Like the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about yet is that this is a very, very divisive album for an album that is so critically acclaimed. There
yeah.
are many people who think that this album is so incredibly difficult to listen to that they can't comprehend why it is getting the love that it is. So
Oh,
those
absolutely.
softer
Yeah,
moments, like everything is romantic and so I
yeah.
appreciate too.
Everything was romantic too. I almost said that, but I would say the two of them are like very important, special moments on the album when you're listening for sure.
Yeah.
But I want to know yours too.
I think we differed on every single part of it.
Yeah.
Best for me is Girl So Confusing with Lorde. That
Okay. Yeah.
is
Yeah. Understandable.
I think that there's an argument that that is the best song of 2024, that when you go back through the archives, that is going to be, along with Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar, like a true center point of understanding where music was in 2024, in the early 2020s, when you look back at this year 10, 15 years from now. And I know that's a huge statement to make. Girl So Confusing, the original version, when it dropped, there were so many questions and thoughts as to who this person that Charli is singing about is. The lore became bigger than the song itself. And then to
Right.
drop the remix, maybe she had teased a remix album coming, but this was 2 weeks after Brat originally dropped. This was breaking the internet level of conversation surrounding a moment. And
Iconic.
completely iconic. And what I love so much about Girl So Confusing, the remix, is it forces Lorde into a format and a sound that she is completely new to. Like, this is what the album to me is all about. It's embracing your uncomfortable moments, being vulnerable, being brash, and not caring about it. And Lorde is an artist who is so polished, so perfectly producing her music, where I think of an album like Solar Power, which was so much playing into the sounds and beauty of nature, and it very much feels like you're listening to that. She writes these very succinct, clever melodies, killer lyrics, driving a ton of metaphors and visual imagery, and for her to come on Charli's song about her, to where Charli's basically saying, like, we have this tension and we have this feud. People think that we're alike, we look the same, but I can't tell if you like me. To air this beef out in such a public format, to then have Lorde come on and match Charli's game, to admit that, yes, she's feeling all of the same things, to have her acknowledge, like, body insecurity, the way that she was able to try out new styles, it worked so well for me. And I mentioned Not Like Us with Kendrick and Drake, and I remember when the Girl So Confusing remix came out, people were like, oh, are we going to get a Not Like Us featuring Drake moment? I'm like, no, don't do that. And
No.
that is not what people want.
Yeah.
It works so well. So
Yeah.
that is the best song on the album for me.
That's a good choice for sure. Yeah. I also feel like because of the fact that they have like similar fan bases too, like it like worked out so well, and it was just that was so iconic.
It was
Everything
so
about it.
good.
Yeah.
So, like, it goes back to the whole thing of, like, what shouldn't work does work perfectly.
Yeah.
It's just mesmerizing to me. So that's my take for best. Worst, and this may be controversial, is B2B.
Okay. Yeah.
I find it
Understandable.
incredibly annoying. Like, it just
Yeah.
does not offer much for me. And especially at the
Yeah.
point in the track list where it comes, it's not offering something new for me.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at the track list. My favorite, I think, has to be, God, this is hard. It's my own game. Okay. I have a tie, and I know that's cheating, but it's my show, so I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
Is the original version of 360, for all of the reasons we already talked about. And just like how legendary it is. I'm So Julia, like bumping that, like all of these things that just became part of 2024 slang. And then underrated remix, the Talk Talk remix with Troye Sivan.
Oh, I love the Talk Talk remix.
Nobody
So
talks
good.
about it. No one
Yeah.
talks
Yeah.
about the Talk Talk remix. Like, I don't get it, especially because the two of them are touring together
Yeah.
and they've worked together so many times in the past. But the reason why I love it so much is because the original Talk Talk, it's good. It's very glossy. It's very glitzy. It's very bubblegum pop, if you even call it
Yeah.
that. I love the Talk Talk remix because it takes that and flips it into something completely new, where there's this true EDM touch to it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that a lot of people would just classify Brat as a dance record. You know, it plays into club aesthetics. It plays into, especially like the UK Euro, like trash Euro dance scene. And it kind of reminds me, the Talk Talk remix, of those euphoric EDM pop crossover moments. And
For
I
sure.
love Troy, especially Troy,
Yeah.
on those
Yeah.
kinds of productions. I think back to his collaboration with Tate McRae and Regard.
Love that
Love
song.
that
Yeah.
song.
Yeah.
So I feel like they both fit really well on that sound. So those
For
are my
sure. Yeah.
favorites.
I definitely understand why you would choose each one for sure. Back to back, do you like the remix with Tinashe?
Yes, much better.
Okay, yeah, agreed. Like I don't listen to back like the original, but the remix, I love Tinashe too, so
Yeah,
Like them collabing was like everything to me.
huge.
But yeah, I agree. Like what Troy added to Talk Talk is like was really cool. I think she's mentioned before about how it's about George and how they would see each other all the time and not
Hmm.
approach each other, but have that energy where they knew that they were interested in each other. So I think it's
Right.
a cute song about them too.
Um, Another part of what made Brat the inescapable moment of 2024, Apple. This
Oh, for
song
sure. Yeah.
popped off out of nowhere because
Yeah.
of that dance that blew up on TikTok.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was honestly really surprised at the best pop solo performance, it getting a nomination for that. Not that it
Yeah,
didn't deserve it, but I was like, wow, Apple is really getting its moment.
I was shocked.
Yeah, when I first heard the album, that was probably one of the least songs that I was expecting would take off. And it was one of the early songs to take off. Like the Apple Dance, I think it started over the summer.
Yeah,
Um, and then it went into the Sweat Tour, and then we saw the Apple Dance of the Sweat Tour became a big thing every night, which was really cool. But
yeah.
yeah, that's definitely a good one for sure.
It completely surprised me just because it's so quirky and it's very fun. Again, it's something that's weird and shouldn't work, but does. And I think
Yeah,
the production on this, a lot of the songs, the productions are very abrasive. For me personally, who doesn't have a long track record with Charli, my friends would tell me to listen to Crash, and I just like had no interest in it. And I had known about what she was doing in the scene and her releases over the years, but it wasn't something that I ever ventured down just because I wasn't really into that like hyper pop genre. And
yeah,
I'm thinking of this album where its entry points are. So if you're someone like me who's just aware of her peripherally and was looking to get into what everyone's talking about, Apple is a huge moment for that. It's probably the poppiest song on the album that would, be in
absolutely.
rotation on like a Z100 type thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like any sort of pop music fan would just hear that and like it because of its catchiness for sure.
So yeah, Apple being nominated for Best Pop Solo Performance took me by huge surprise. So the
Yeah.
nominees for Best Pop Solo Performance are Beyonce with Bodyguard, which hallelujah, like thank God that song is getting the attention it deserves. Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso, Apple, Billie Eilish's Birds of a Feather, and Chappell Roan Good Luck Babe. This is a stacked category. Like I genuinely have no idea who is going to take home the win because it's kind of like I see it in my head as like a domino effect. Like as soon as one
Yeah.
domino falls in one of the other pop categories or in the general field, we'll have a very clear idea as to where the Academy decided to put their votes this year. Do you have
Exactly.
any
Yeah.
guesses? Like where do you think this is going?
Uh, I feel like there's so many categories where it's like that. It's just they're so stacked to the point where it could go any way. I think Espresso and Birds of a Feather probably have the most chance at winning in this specific category. But I can also see them really loving Apple. And I think like when they do all like the pre-televised awards,
Yeah.
like that's always a good sign because it's like that's usually when they announce the dance stuff too.
Yep.
So I think if we see Charlie win a lot of those like remix dance categories, we're gonna see her sweep during the main show.
Definitely.
Um, but for this one, yeah, I don't know if Apple will win, but I could see Birds of Feather or Espresso winning. What about you?
I think Charlie's best shot is going to be in the dance categories or for guests with
Hmm.
Billie Eilish. I think
For
those are
sure.
her easiest paths to victory. I think
Agreed.
pop solo is so intense because a lot of it depends on what happens with Beyonce and Cowboy Carter.
Yeah.
If they're going to follow what they did with Renaissance, where she won in the genre fields but didn't take anything home in the general categories, then Bodyguard will probably win pop solo. And I'd be very okay with that. Even though it's not the
Yeah.
biggest song, it's still an incredible song.
Yeah, it
And
definitely deserves its
giving
nomination
her
for sure.
something, yeah, giving her something there would be a way of appeasing people. I worry for Beyonce in the country categories. And I know that probably sounds like like what? The genre fields are voted by the genre academy members. And then I
Right.
think you can cross over like I think you could cross into three genres or something. And I worry for Beyonce that because of what happened at the CMAs where she was completely snubbed, that a lot of the voting bodies are going to be similar. I don't know how they cross over, like what the actual math is.
Hmm.
So I'm worried for her there. So giving her pop may be a way of pleasing things there. Espresso and Birds of a Feather are definite front runners for this category. And I can see kind of how back in 2021 when Dua Lipa won a pop album for Future Nostalgia and then Taylor
Hmm.
won Album of the Year for Folklore, you could give Sabrina pop solo performance and give Chapel album or vice versa. Something like that because
That's
the two of
true.
them are
Yeah.
very parallel in
Yeah.
their nominations.
Good luck, babe, too. I'm like, I guess I could even see that like winning this award. I don't know if Torture Poets could win. I honestly don't think it will.
Yeah.
But I don't think Taylor has the best chance at winning Song of the Year, Record of the Year. But if the album, I guess, won, then it could be another moment like that. But I don't think that she's gonna get it
I
this time.
can't imagine. It would be her fifth album of the year win, back to back years.
Yeah.
And just knowing how the critical reception to this wasn't nearly the same as it was for any of the prior winners, it
Yeah.
would feel, again, like I personally don't think that Midnight should have won album of the year. That should have gone to SOS
Oh
by
wow.
SZA, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Either
I
one.
don't think it
Yeah.
should have won, but it won because of Taylor, the celebrity and impact rather than musical quality. And I think Tortured Poets is a better album. I would have rather Tortured Poets take home album of the year over Midnight, but because Midnight's already won and with how stacked this year was, it's not my pick. My pick is Hit Me Hard and Soft.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely think Hit Me Hard and Soft has a really good chance at winning, and I would love if it did. I think
Right.
it's like such a great album.
So part of Brat has been the continued evolution of Brat, and we've talked a little bit about it from the Brat and it's the same, but it's not because there's three more songs to Brat, but it's completely different, the remix album. The real magic of this era to me is the way that she was able to take this finely crafted universe to then bring in other artists to every song on the album. These songs are completely reinvented. Like, Talk Talk on the standard is very different than the Talk Talk remix. Songs like Girl So Confusing are more similar, and Guess with Billy are more similar to the originals, but some of these songs are completely done in a brand new way. I'm thinking I Might Say Something Stupid. I'm thinking Everything Is Romantic. I'm talking Apple with Japanese House. So did any of these stand out more than others to you, where they were more unique takes on a song that you already kind of knew and loved?
Yeah, everything was is romantic. That remix was crazy. Hearing what Caroline Polachek added to that, I think that she was a great artist to go with that song and to match the feel, the vibe of it that Charlie wanted. But yeah, that remix album, the idea of it and her just crafting that whole basically new body of work in a
Mm-hmm.
short amount of time too. I think she started that like over the summer or something.
Yeah, and
And she had the
also the release of it, in case you didn't see it, Charlie had in the artists' hometowns, or like the town that they're most affiliated with, billboards put up of the artist's name in the Brat font with the Brat color in kind of like a mirrored text. And it
Mhm.
was, again, so simple, but it became kind of like a internet global scavenger hunt of when you were going to see another billboard pop up with a different artist's name. And it, again, just created a sense of community. And that, to me, is at the core of what Brat has been about and transformed into.
The whole thing with the billboards in the cities got so many people talking about it. I also just feel like this era like has a really good shot at lasting throughout 2025 too. Like with Charlie doing Coachella
Right.
and her arena tour, which I think is will be such a big moment for her first ever like solo arena tour.
Yeah, well, that
So
was actually the final question I was going to ask you is, where do you see the success of Brat, the remix album, the whole era, taking Charlie into 2025? And how do you think that it will impact her next album? Like, very specifically, her next album. Is this the type of thing where she'll continue the sound and the aesthetic and try it again, and people will kind of look at it as a Folklore Evermore type situation where you have the same thing and the same aesthetic and idea replicated? Or does she need to prove again that she can transform a chameleon into a completely different thing?
yeah, I think she knows now that like she won't be able to replicate any of this at all. Like she might be able to replicate the success for sure if she plans an era out accordingly, but even though nobody expected it to take off the way it did, there was still like a bunch of planning that had to go into it, like the whole Brat wall and all the teasers, the music videos, who she was going to get in the music videos. So if it taught her anything, it's that she needs to go extra hard with the planning process for the next album and figure out like how she's going to get these viral internet moments again,
Mm-hmm.
which she has a great team behind her. So I think that she will do that just fine. But it's also like scary too because this album was so big. The next one is so important. It's like
I would be
make or break, you
horrified.
know?
There's the general theme of how much pressure is put on an artist who has a massive debut, their sophomore effort. You don't want to have a sophomore slump. You don't want to be a flop after one album. Like, you want to really prove that you have longevity here. And, even though Brat is her sixth album, it's kind of her first in this new era of music and this
Yeah.
new landscape and in terms of just pop culture awareness that she has. So this
Yeah.
almost feels like whatever's going to come next is going to be held to that standard.
For sure, yeah. I think she's doing a great job at like having the era last. Like I think her doing performances throughout next year is really smart because if anything, she'll just get even more people interested and tuned in. So that time she does start her next body of work, she'll already be having more fans, you know. The next era will still be amazing. But I'm just like, what is she gonna do now?
I don't know. It's really hard because as she has consistently shown throughout her discography, she's constantly evolving and shapeshifting within hyperpop, outside of hyperpop, and trying out new textures. She's a really, really tough one to crack because the idea of Brat is that this is so clearly who Charli is, at least at this point in life, and it's so authentically her. So how can you expect someone to authentically change? You know, maybe it's she's putting on a character and she's trying out this new lens of like a folklore style of writing where you're writing about experiences that aren't yours. That's one concept.
Yeah.
You can go into a completely different genre in the way that Beyonce has been taking throughout this 3-act trilogy project, going into genres that were traditionally gated to bring her own take, her own style and sound into them to help evolve the genre further. She could go down that route and say, hey, I want to blend hyperpop dance and rock. You don't know.
Yeah. That'd be crazy. Yeah. I would love to see her do some sort of like concept trilogy type of vibe. But also the thing that you mentioned about her developing a character, I feel like would be really cool too. And she's also doing so many acting projects now. They're bound to just make her even more of a star. So we'll see, but
Yeah.
so hard
I
to predict
mean,
where she's gonna go.
the world is her oyster.
Yeah, exactly.
With that, Adam, thank you so, so much for joining me and talking about Brat because I, would not be able to go into this by myself because you have such a plethora of information on her backstory. So huge thank you for coming on the podcast. For anyone who's new, where can they find you on socials? Plug yourself wherever you want people to find you.
For sure. Yeah. First off, thanks for having me. It was so fun. I love talking about this album and like love your videos too. So it's like I
Thank
knew
you.
that this would be a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Um, and you can find me on social media at Adam the Flop on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube.
And I have no doubt that you'll be back on here. So we'll
Thank
keep
you.
it going.
Yeah. Would love to. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. The next episode is going to be the 4th installment in the 5 favorite albums of 2024 mini-series. So stay tuned for which album that is going to be and who is going to join me to talk about it. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed and we will see you all soon. Bye.